In this video, traders are going to look at the question, should you use guaranteed stops with your spread betting or CFD broker in the UK? Hey guys, a warm welcome to you. All right, so good question this. Should you use guaranteed stops with a UK broker? Now, for those who are not familiar, in the UK, if you're trading with a spread betting company or CFD company, many of these will allow you to trade with a guaranteed stop. So what's the difference between a guaranteed stop and a normal stop? Very quickly, a normal stop could potentially have slippage. So let's say you were long Apple and you had a stop at a certain price. The price then opened under that price the next day. The stock, should I say, opened under that price the next day. You will get stopped out of the first available price. So you would get that slippage. Same, let's say you had a currency trade on and the currency moved dramatically overnight, talk about the Swiss, then you would be stopped out of whatever the next available price is. That's the caveat with a stop, right? A guaranteed stop basically says you are guaranteed, or the broker is guaranteeing that you will exit the position at the stop price that you say. So if you say 10, the stop will be 10, even if it gaps to 0, if it goes bust overnight, you're still going to come out at 10 if you're long, or vice versa if you're short. So on the face of it, it seems like this is really good, right? This is kind of great because you've got no risk of slippage, you've got no risk of any damage with the stops. It's all going to work very nicely. Okay, that's good, but the broker will charge you for that. There is an extra fee for placing that. In other words, generally speaking, it varies from broker to broker. It may be that there's a wider spread when you get into it, so you place the stop when you're entering the trade. It may be that there's a fee based on just taking it off additionally. So if you've got the trade on, then you add a guaranteed stop, they might take a few points off you for that. You're basically paying for this insurance, right? Nothing comes for free, guys, does it? In the markets especially, and you're paying for this insurance. It's basically an insurance policy, isn't it? And so they wouldn't offer it, a broker wouldn't offer it if it's profitable for them. They'd rather just not offer it. Now, there's a couple of things, and I'm going to talk about ESMA in a second, how this comes into play. But the reason that people do it is they want the comfort of knowing they're not going to lose more than they said. Now, with ESMA at the moment, the new rules that have come in for spread betting brokers and CFD brokers, the balance cannot go to 0. Double check it, of course. You know, you've got to make sure you're with the broker who's regulated, etc. But the new rules say that your balance can't go to 0. So that stops you getting kind of wiped out and more. So if you're kind of really aggressively margined and it gaps down, it takes you into negative balance, that won't happen. But it won't stop you losing a vast amount if you've got that money in your account. You've got 100 grand in there, you only wanted to risk 1 on your trade, the thing gaps massively, you could still lose 10. So that doesn't affect you with that, but it does affect you if you go to negatives. That's worth thinking about. So the question is, should you use them or not? We're going through what they all are and how much they cost. Generally speaking, guys, there's no need to use a guaranteed stop. And let me kind of explain why. One thing I should point out as well is that there's always a minimum distance that you can set the stop on guaranteed. So they won't let you put it like 10 ticks or 20 ticks or whatever, because what you could do overnight is you could go long on a stock overnight. You could have a very, very tight stop, guaranteed stop. And then if it gaps slightly away and under you, you've kind of locked in the profit, which will give you a massive edge on trading, and which wouldn't make sense for the broker to do that. So they have like a minimum thing, and that might be say 10%, 20%, even 30%. So really you kind of quite wide, and especially in indices as well, they'll kind of widen it out over the weekend and say, well, there's news coming, expected news, maybe it'll be a 500 point guaranteed stop. So really you're kind of paying for something that ultimately is very unlikely to happen anyway. So my feeling generally, like I say, this is my opinion, don't take this as advice. Everyone's different, everyone's personal circumstances are different, but generally speaking, because the stop has to be so wide and you pay for it, you're almost paying for insurance that's never going to happen, especially if you're trading, you know, something like, I know that we had this with Swiss, and of course it would have paid off in Swiss, but if you think about the amount of times that you trade, like if you're trading euro, US dollar, it trades 24/5, it's super liquid, it's unlikely to gap massively. You might get some over the weekend gap, but unless it's dramatic news, it's not going to be that much. And a really wide guaranteed stop is just going to not really benefit you whatsoever in that case. You might have a case for it, maybe with individual stocks, but like I say, there's no real free lunch. The broker will charge you a hefty premium for it, and the stop will be super wide. So if you're talking about 25% stop, that's the most you can put it, or the minimum distance you can put it. You're going to lose 25% of the asset value before you're stopped out. Now, I don't know about you, but unless the thing goes bust, unless you're kind of putting a stop in to guarantee it from going bust overnight, it doesn't really protect you. I guess you could look at some of the stocks like ASOS recently dropped 40%. Not sure what the guaranteed stop was on that. There are circumstances where you're going to come out okay on it, and if you're frightened of being caught out massively, then it makes sense in certain circumstances to use it if the price isn't massively wide, if the cost to do it isn't that much. But if you're trading the bigger things, the liquid things, like your Dow, like your FTSE, like your DAX, like all this kind of stuff, you're probably better off not using the guaranteed stop and just being prepared to stop out. Yes, you've got to accept the extra risk with that, but over time, I suspect that will pay off better for you, because the cost of doing that, and also the kind of width that you have to put the stop. Like I say, it will be super wide. When volatility picks up, it'll be super wide. When we see the Dow moving 500-600 points, you can bet the guaranteed stop's probably sitting at 800 points, in which case you would have been stopped out way before then. And the other thing, just to add before we go, guys, is that it actually encourages you to have a wider stop. You think, well, I'll have that guaranteed stop in and that'll be fine. Ultimately, you probably don't want that much of a wide stop. You want a narrower stop. So the answer to the question, should you use a guaranteed stop, is, my opinion, generally is no for most circumstances. Very occasionally there might be a circumstance where you want to guarantee that. Maybe a share is the right one and you're worried about some sort of profit warning hammering the share by 50%. Maybe you're trading an asset that is very vulnerable to some kind of extreme move, like the Swiss was, like something, in which case maybe paying that premium makes sense. But the majority of time, in my opinion, it's opinion not advice, is no, but there might be sometimes, very slightly sometimes, when it's worth doing. Okay guys, take care, see you in the next one, bye bye.